The Karate Kid is no question an 80s classic, and now this is the third game tied to the franchise on the Nintendo Switch. First we had Cobra Kai The Karate Kid: A Saga Continues. That was surprisingly good. Then came Cobra Kai 2 Dojo's Rising, which was absolutely awful. So where does the Karate Kid Street Rumble fit in? Well, that's what we're here to find out today. Now if you do enjoy this video, subscribe and let's get into it. Unlike the previous two Karate Kid games, which focused on the Cobra Kai TV show, the Karate Kid Street Rumble, it takes us back to the original trilogy of movies. Now the bulk of the game here, it focuses on the first movie, as it should, while the second and third films, they're wrapped up relatively quickly. You know, growing up on the movies, I didn't really judge them back then, but looking back at it, it's clear the storytelling took a bit of a dive as the series went on. Unfortunately, even though it shifts the focus in a smart way, it's far from perfect. And yes, the game covers recognizable locations and packs in more than a few iconic characters, but the writing somehow still misses the mark. And yes, I know the source material isn't exactly Shakespeare, but it feels a little, I guess, dumber here. The presentation doesn't help either. Still images and text dialogue boxes, they're about as engaging as they sound. Basically, there's a lot of missed potential in bringing these classic moments to life. Now that said, let's be real here, it is a beat 'em up. We're not here for award-winning storytelling, we're here to crane kick our way to victory, so let's talk gameplay. First off, the Karate Kid Street Rumble is a beat 'em up at its core, and the good news is you can team up with friends in 4-player local co-op. Unfortunately, there's no online play, which is definitely a letdown in this day and age, but that aside, the game gives you 4 playable characters to choose from. That's Daniel, Mr. Miyagi, Ali Mills, who you might remember as I think it was the love interest from the first movie, and Kumiko, a character from Karate Kid 2. It's definitely a decent little lineup. But now, how do they actually play? Well, the controls in the Karate Kid Street Rumble, they're actually pretty straightforward. You've got your standard light and heavy attacks, you can sprint, jump, you can also pull off jump attacks. You can also grab characters if you do walk into and connect with them. It's what you'd expect from a beat 'em up, but there's a bit more depth here than you might think. For one, you can hold down the heavy attack either on the ground or in mid-air to charge up and deal extra damage. It's a nice touch that adds some strategy to the otherwise kind of button mashy combat. Surprisingly then though, there's also a parry maneuver. Now I can't say I relied on it a ton, but in a couple of the game's boss encounters, it proved to be a game changer. Those fights were clearly designed around the parry system, so while it might not get much use in regular enemy waves, it's a skill worth keeping in your back pocket when those big battles do roll around. Now I want to talk special moves, because if there's one thing the Karate Kid Street Rumble fans will latch onto here, it's going to be those. In the upper left corner of the screen, you've got your health meter, and just below that, you're going to notice what the game calls shards. Now once these shards fill up, you can activate a special ability. So for example, Daniel can bust out his iconic crane kick, and depending on the direction you pair with the input, you're going to get different variations of the move, and this also applies to the core combat system, giving you some flexibility. What really actually though sets these specials apart though, it's not the moves themselves. They are fun but pretty standard for the genre. What I liked is how they double as armor. You can actually unleash that big flashy attack if you want, but if you decide to hold off, those shards act as a shield of sorts, so as you take hits, they're going to deplete before your health does. It definitely adds some strategy. There's also then a bit of an RPG twist to the gameplay as well, which adds some much needed depth. As you progress through the story mode, you'll be gaining XP that unlocks new abilities for each character. You're looking at things like extra shards, meaning you can unleash more specials in a single window. Additional continues, you start with 3 and once they're gone it's back to the beginning of the level, but then there'll even be things like new moves. You know, it's not a full-blown skill tree where you get to pick and choose upgrades, but it's a nice touch that adds some replayability. It just gives you something to work towards, and as you unlock new moves or abilities, you'll find yourself kind of tweaking how you approach each encounter. When it comes to the levels then, it's great to see iconic locations from the Karate Kid series making an appearance, and each one brings something unique to the table. However, they're also a bit on the basic side. There aren't many items to interact with, and it's actually only 2 pickups, one to recover health, another to fill your shards. While weapon pickups wouldn't really fit with the Karate Kid theme, I did find myself missing those elements from other beat 'em up experiences. That said though, look, there are moments where the game switches things up in a fun way. One standout is a chase sequence where you have to escape an incoming boss encounter on a timer. It adds a dash of tension. Another moment I enjoyed was when an obstacle blocked the path, forcing you to destroy it while enemies swarmed in. It added some urgency and variety to the experience. There are also then mini-games sprinkled within the story mode. These are simple button reaction challenges, and while they don't reinvent the wheel, I enjoyed them for what they were. I was actually surprised, however, that the iconic wax on, wax off wasn't featured in these. It turns out it's actually reserved for Mr. Miyagi's special move. As for the enemies, they're decent. Like most beat 'em ups, you'll see a lot of skin swaps and similar movesets, but there's just enough variety to keep things interesting. You've got your standard grunts, heavies, enemies with ranged attacks, sub-bosses, and those of course then lead up to those final bosses. Unfortunately, the big boss moments were a bit underwhelming. A few were decent, but most were pretty easy to exploit once you found their pattern, which definitely took away from that challenge. Talking difficulty, on normal, the game is a pretty easy entry into the beat 'em up genre. There's also an easy mode, which is perfect if you're playing with someone new to the genre or with younger family members. If you're looking for more of a challenge, there are 3 additional difficulty options you can unlock. Those will really crank things up as you do progress. And then in terms of replayability, the Karate Kid Street Rumble makes a solid attempt. There's 4 characters, each featuring a unique skill. They also have unlocks, as we mentioned earlier. There's a decent amount of variety here basically, and alongside that you'll unlock new modes as you do play, including an endless wave mode, an arcade mode, and a boss rush mode, giving you plenty of reasons to keep coming back. So overall for gameplay, it's not the best beat 'em up out there, by far in fact, but it's not bad at all. In fact, I had fun with it, and it performs well on the system with no noticeable bugs or performance issues, and as a fan of the Karate Kid series, I was always excited to see what iconic location it would take me to next. Now though, let's talk about how this game looks in action, because for a game that draws so much from the movies, the visuals are pretty important. Visually, I really do like what they've done with the core gameplay. The locations are instantly recognizable from the movies, and I thought most of the characters looked great. A lot of the animations, especially for the special moves, really impressed me. The game leans into that old school pixel style, which I personally love. It gives it that retro charm, but with enough modern touches that it doesn't feel, dated or cheap. They've definitely kept the characters' personalities intact as well through the visuals, and that's something I can appreciate. The same then goes for the levels, as I mentioned earlier. While they're relatively similar throughout, a little more environmental variety could have added some extra depth. Still, what is here works and it complements the gameplay. This said though, I hate the story delivery. It's like they had this amazing pixel design for the gameplay and then decided to drop the ball when it came to the cutscenes. Instead of, leaning into that pixel style, they went with this cheap looking, just mostly still images. The characters barely resemble in these moments who they're supposed to be, and it reminded me of one of those dodgy mobile game ads you see all over the internet. If you are playing this for the story, just know you'll likely be disappointed in how it's presented. Audio-wise, it's okay. The music features some really nice chiptune tracks that I enjoyed, and a few of the sound effects, like landing an attack on an opponent, those are pretty decent. They definitely help add to that retro feel the game's going for, which works well for the most part. However, I think they could have done more to fill out the sound field here. Specifically, there's a noticeable lack of audio cues when you take damage. When the action ramps up and things get busy on screen, it can be tough to figure out what is going on. More than once I found my health depleting because I didn't realize I was taking damage. A simple sound attached to getting hit would have gone a long way in helping keep track of the chaos. It's a small but important detail here that they did miss. Finally, voice acting, there's nothing for the cutscenes, and this could have really helped elevate the poor presentation. Overall, Karate Kid Street Rumble is surprisingly decent. I went into this one with the lowest of expectations, and I've been pleasantly surprised. It's got a decent little combat system. The levels, the stages, they're fine. And then it's great to see iconic locations from the movies. I think they also handled the level distribution well, with the right focus on the original movie compared to parts 2 and 3. That said though, it's not without its shortcomings. It's on the easy side for the genre, the boss fights don't quite hit the mark, levels are repetitive, and the story presentation, honestly, it is absolutely awful. The lack of voice acting here is disappointing too. That said, it's not without its shortcomings. It's on the easy side for the genre. The boss fights don't hit the mark. Levels can feel, well, they are repetitive. And the story presentation, honestly, absolutely awful. The lack of voice acting as well, definitely disappointing. But despite all of that, I had fun. And that's really what matters most at the end of the day. This said though, there's one thing we haven't touched on, an elephant in the room, and that is the pricing. I rarely bring up pricing in my videos as discounts happen quickly, and I prefer to judge the game for what it is, but in this case, I have to mention it. At $39.99 USD or your regional equivalent, this game is way overpriced. There are simply too many great alternatives at a much lower price point. I mean, even heavy hitters like Streets of Rage 4 or Shredder's Revenge, these are near perfect examples of the genre, and they're priced at $24.99 USD, and that's before you even catch them on sale. Basically, there's a lot of good options you should be checking out before you do get to this one. In such a competitive market, this just isn't trying to compete at that price point. So my final score today, it's an above average 6 out of 10. I think there's actually a lot to like here, but it has its shortcomings, and I definitely recommend waiting for a sale. So will you be checking out Karate Kid Street Rumble? Let me know in the comments. What do you think about what you've seen today in the video? Is this something you'd like to check out? Maybe kind of a wait for a sale situation? But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe. It helps out the channel a huge amount. And I'll see you all on the next video. Cheers all.